So Chapter 6 is all about arrays. Arrays is a different word for lists. Basically what we're doing now is we're going to be looking at lists, which are extremely useful. If you think of any game that you play, there's probably a list that the user has where there's like an inventory. You know, as you pick up stuff in the game, it gets added to a list of the things that the character is holding. Lists are also really useful when you're working with lots of data. Think like spreadsheets and stuff like that. It's going to be really useful to have lists as one of the things we can code. So by the end of this video, you will be able to access and change items in an array. You'll be able to declare and initialize arrays, find the length of an array, identify and fix array out-of-bounds exceptions, and fill arrays with items. So, like I said before, an array is just a list of data. It's great for storing lots of similar information. The indexes of an array always start at 0. This is just like strings. That means if you have an array of size n, it's indexed from 0 to n minus 1. So if your array is of size 5, the indexes in the array go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If your array is of size 3, your indexes are 0, 1, 2. So it's always one less than the size of the array. This is exactly like strings. So how you access items from an array. Let's say the name of our array is test. If you wanted to access an item, you would do test, and then in square brackets, you would put a number. So here I wrote I. I is the index of the item we want. So if I wanted to get the first item out of an array, I could say test, and then in square brackets, I would put 0. That would give me the item at the 0 index. If I wanted the second item, I could do test, and then 1 in square brackets. This is how we access an item. It's always with the square brackets, not with the parentheses or the curly brackets. This is the square brackets that are kind of near the backspace key. Once you've accessed items, you can use them for different things. So if we wanted to find the average of 3 test scores in a test array, we could do test 0, test 1, test 2, add them up, and then divide by 3. And that's kind of how you read that, test 0, test 1, test 2. We can also print things, so we could print out you got a, and then add on test 0 to print out the first test score. So that's how you can use those accessed items. So then how to set items in an array. If we wanted to set the first item in test to 100, we would say test square bracket 0 equals 100. That'll take 100 and put it in the very first spot in test. I could also say test 0 equals, and then I could do some math, 76 plus a variable, extra credit. And it'll do that math and then set that answer into test 0. To declare and initialize an array, it looks like this. We've got int, empty square brackets, test, equals new int, and then in square brackets we have a number. So let's talk through each part of this. This first part tells us what type we are filling the array with. So you can tell from this that test is going to be filled with ints. You can only fill an array with one type. So it can only be filled with ints or doubles or booleans or strings. It can't be filled with ints and doubles. Kind of annoying. That's just the way it is though. So that's what the first part is. The next thing is the name of our array. You can name it whatever you want, just like any other variable. We always have to use the word new when we're making a new array, kind of like when we make new objects. And then this last part tells us how many spaces we want in the array, or how many slots. The other annoying thing about arrays is that you can't add slots later. So if you say there's 25 things in this array, later you can't add a 26th item. We'll figure out how to fix that later. There's kind of a sneaky way to fix it. But for now, just know that once you set a size of an array, you can't change it. So far, this has not put anything in the array. It's just made an empty array. So just to recap, declaring the array looks like this. Int bracket bracket test. Initializing is this part. Test equals new int, and then however long your array is. And then when we put them together, it looks like that. Okay, so if you need to find the length of your array, If your array was named test, you would do test.length. That gives you the length of the array, basically the number of items you can fit in the array. This value is set as soon as you initialize the array. It can't be changed, like I already said. Also notice, this is super annoying, the dot length for array doesn't have parentheses at the end. Dot length for string does, dot length for array does not. That's something that the AP graders would be pretty lenient on if you forgot. The compiler won't be lenient though. The compiler will get mad at you if you mix those up. This is an exception that you're going to get a lot once we start working with arrays. When you put in an index outside of the array, you're going to get an array out of bounds exception. So let's say you have an array with 25 items in it. If you did test 26, you would get an exception. So you'd hit compile and it would show up with a bunch of red text. That's because there isn't a 26th item. You'd also get an exception if you did test 25, because since there's 25 items in the array and the indexing starts at 0, the largest item is indexed at 24, so the 25th item doesn't exist, or the item at the 25th index doesn't exist. So those would both result in exceptions. This is a super easy mistake to make. I guarantee you're going to make it a lot. Totally fine. Just know that if you see an array index out of bounds exception, it means something is messed up with where you're accessing items in the array. Alright, so there's two different ways to fill an array with items. One way is to use a for loop, and the other is to use an initializer. I'm going to show you both. To do this with a for loop, so I made a scanner here, and then you can see on this line I've declared and initialized the array, so I have an array with 5 spots in it, and it's open right now. There's nothing in it. Then I do a for loop where I starts at 0. We're going to go as long as I is less than the length, so as long as I is less than 5, and then we'll increase I each time. So each time we go through the loop, we're going to ask the user to enter their next score, and then we're going to take test at I and set it equal to whatever the user puts in. So this is using a scanner and a for loop to fill an array with user entered data. The other way you can create or fill an array is with an initializer, and this is a little bit easier, but it only works if you know everything that's going in the array right away. So we could also do int bracket bracket test equals, and then this is the initializer. We've got curly bracket, and then all of our test scores, and then curly bracket. This can only be done when you're first making the array, like when you declare it. That's why I said you can only do it if you know what all the values are going to be right away. Couple things to note. Notice that we didn't need to say what size it was, we just put in the numbers, and we also didn't need the word new. Okay, so what you're going to do now is open the 6.0 video check on Moodle and answer those questions. You can definitely have your notes out while you do this, and you can rewatch this video if you need to.